And the speaker for the day is called Douglas Logedi. He is a researcher with GENS Trilateral Chair. He's been the GENS Trilateral, wow, that word. GENS Trilateral Chair is a partnership between Stellenbosch University, Brunel University, and the University of Nairobi. And his focus is on pricing models, energy pricing and energy pricing models in Africa. And he is also an author of a book named Chasing a Bullet. It's a crime fiction book. So we have an author in the house. He has a background in finance, and so he is the right person to be speaking about this topic. I would like to introduce Douglas Logedi. Welcome, Douglas. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting introduction that you give there. It's the GENS Trilateral Chair. That word can become a problem. So thank you very much. My name is Douglas Logedi Luhangala. I am a Kenyan, first of all. I am a passionate person in terms of sustainable energy. I started thinking about sustainability when I was in second year. I started a blog which I was just trying to blog about sustainability issues and expounding on the sustainable development goals, because I thought my campus classmates and schoolmates did not understand it much. So that's where my passion began. But then I was studying finance. So I tried working in finance for a moment. I worked at Rift Valley Railways and also Seven Seas Technologies. But then I quickly discovered that I was not cut out for finance. So I left that particular line of work and quickly ventured into research. My first research project was researching information about my own book, which I have published. It's called Chasing a Bullet. So I was just trying to research about crime in East Africa and, just trying to document things about it. And that's where I met my boss and my current mentor, who introduced me to the research in the area that I was interested in. That's academia and energy, to be specific. And that's how I landed myself on the GENS project. GENS is a short form for gendered energy solutions, or if you want to lengthen it, mainstreaming gender in energy sustainability, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and in informal settlements. So we have done a lot of projects in Kenya and South Africa as well. And as Lynette said, it's a partnership between the University of Nairobi, led by Dr. Amola Mbole, Stellenbosch University in South Africa, led by Professor Josephine Msango, and Brunel University in London, led by Dr. Fabrizio Question. It's important to mention that I work in a team, and I know some of my team members are here. I work in a team of about 24 people, and it's still growing. The team is drawn from Kenya, London, or UK, and South Africa, and other people working from different parts of the world, but then working under these three institutions primarily. So without so much more in terms of introductions, because I think that's quite a lengthy introduction that I've given there, just want to take you through what we'll be talking about today. So today we want to look at SDG 9 and SDG 7 to be specific. And we just want to look at how can you get linkages between the two? And I'll be giving you lessons that I and my team have learned from doing research in different informal settlements. In Kenya, we have done a lot of research in Mathare. In South Africa, I get a lot of problems in terms of mentioning that particular informal settlement. So I'll not try biting my tongue. Yeah, but we've done a lot of research in both countries. I am based in Kenya, and my interest is in energy pricing and energy price modeling. So very quickly, I'll just give you a bit of a context to what we'll be talking about today. First of all, before we talk about SDG 7 and SDG 9 in Africa, you need to know some basics about Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa mainly has 1.1 billion people. Now, I know somebody will tell me, no, we have 1.4 billion people. But then I have intentionally excluded the part of Africa that is part of the MENA region, that is the Middle East and North African regions. So the Arabic part of Africa, to be a bit cliche, is often not considered to have the same challenges as the rest of the sub-Saharan Africa because of the benefits that they get by being part of the MENA region. That means that their development is a bit more fast-paced, and their development can be better evaluated based on the development in the Middle East and not the development in Africa, because that is the region that they subscribe to most. So I hope you now understand why I say 1.1 billion and not 1.4. 60% of Africa is aged below 30. So you have to know that this is a very young continent that you are looking at. 70%, as we know, are still reliant on traditional and unsafe fuels. That is things like kerosene and biomass. And 500 million people do not have access to electricity. This is very important background considering this last point, that sub-Saharan Africa, from research, from testing, and from science, has the potential to produce 350 gigawatts from hydroelectric power. And the Congo River has been touted to be one of the best in that. 110 gigawatts in terms of wind energy. And Kenya in the north is tapping into that already. We have 1,000 gigawatts, not 100, from solar. Africa has the biggest desert in the world, the biggest single desert in the world in the Sahara Desert. And I'll be showing you a map that shows just what part of Africa has what potential. When you understand this basis, then you understand that having 500 million people without access to electricity and having this potential is quite of a mismatch. So it begs the question then, where is the problem? And why is Africa left behind that much? To just know how much Africa is when you rank it close to the world, I got this map from the World Bank. And if you look at the darker color, the darker coloring means looks at the people who have the best access. So like 100% access in the United States, in most parts of South America, in most parts of Europe. When you come to Africa, you can see a lot of light shading there. Kenya is somewhere between 60 and 70%. South Africa is somewhere between 80 and 90%. Nigeria is somewhere between 70 and 80%. No, Nigeria is somewhere between 50 and 60%. The northern part of Africa, now, if you look at this map, you realize why I excluded the MENA region, because they are above 90%, all of them. And in fact, one of the biggest solar plants in the world is found in Africa. So, and it's found in the MENA region, it's not found in sub-Saharan Africa. So then you realize why I had to exclude them, because then their challenges are not the challenges for the rest of us. Now, there's a funny corridor when you look at the map of Africa that cuts through the center of Africa, almost shaping the map in itself, that is very light. So you look at that map, it cuts from the western coast, and it cuts through the center of Africa. It kind of excludes Kenya in a way, then it goes down all the way up to Mozambique. This is the most energy poor part of Africa, to use that particular word, is the part where it has the least access. There are actually countries in Africa which have 0 to 10% access to electricity, which is considered really, really, really troublesome anywhere else in the world. Now, it is very unfair for you to tell people about how poor, energy poor Africa is without telling them what is the potential that we have in terms of production. Now, I talked about this earlier. I told you that we have potential to produce different forms of energy. And if you look on the left, you'll see the key. There's the biomass, geothermal, hydro, solar, wind, and so on. And you can see on the map, I've tried to place them in different places which have the highest potential. If you look carefully, you'll see that a lot of these are crossing through Kenya. If you know the geographical location of Kenya well, you'll see we have parts of geothermal because of the Great Rift Valley. There's a lot of potential for geothermal in the Great Rift Valley. We have parts of wind, especially in the northern part of Kenya. We have very high potential in hydro, and we have very high potential in solar because of also the northern part of the country. So, and the rest of Africa has the same. Pretty much is evenly distributed across Africa. And the countries that are located closer to the oceans have a high potential in terms of wind energy. And the countries that are located at the desert areas have a lot of potential in terms of solar energy, as you'd expect. And the countries that are located or that have parts of the Rift Valley crossing through their country have a very high potential in terms of geothermal. And then, of course, we have isolated cases which have potential for geothermal, even though they are not part of the Rift Valley, especially in the northern part of Africa. And also bioenergy is very, very much evenly distributed across the continent. Now, this brings into focus the kind of projections that I gave you earlier in terms of what is the potential of Africa in production of different forms. When you have looked at this, then you look at it in terms of we are so energy poor compared to the rest of the world, and we have this much potential, then how can we integrate our different, the two main sustainable development goals that we are looking at? And also, just to mention, SDG 17 in terms of partnerships, it comes into every other SDG that we look at. So our two main SDGs that I'll be focusing on today is SDG 7, that's access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy. You have to take into account those four: affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern. It's not like we don't have access to energy anyway. Kerosene is a source of energy, and everyone has access. Biomass is a source of energy, and we have access. But then, is it sustainable? Is it affordable? And is it modern? And also, when you look at it in terms of sustainability, then you want to look at it in terms of what footprint does it leave to the environment and issues like that. And then we will briefly look at resilient infrastructure, inclusivity, and sustainability in terms of industry, and also different stakeholders in that regard and what they have done. And mainly the experiences that I'll be giving you are from the projects that we have done as GENS and the different other research projects that we have done. And I'll encourage you to just keep typing your questions as they come so that you can respond to them when that time comes. So first of all, let's think through what is SDG 7 all about. We might just be speaking about SDG 7. Someone is here who has not heard about SDG 7 before. SDG 7 is about modern energy, efficient energy, and mostly a focus on renewable energy. If you go back to the map that I just showed you here, it shows you all this potential that is showing you is potential for renewable energy, not any other form of energy, energy that is sustainable and energy that is renewable. And that's what SDG 7 is all about, access to that kind of energy, in which Africa, by the way, is projected to have the highest potential in the world. And then also SDG 7 is about transition to more efficient renewable energy. Now, as I said earlier, 70% of Africa still relies on biomass or unsustainable energy for that matter. And so SDG 7 tries to look at how can we transition our communities, how can we transition our rural setting, how can we transition our consumption behavior, our innovation to focus more on renewable energy, and also bringing different stakeholders from SDG 17 in terms of partnerships. SDG 7 also focuses on increased research into sustainable energy. Now, funding into research in sustainable energy in Africa has been on the increase in the last 7 or 8 years, because then everyone has come to realize that there is high potential in Africa, and there's even potential to export part of the energy that we produce if we just have the right technology and if we just have the right level of involvement. So research into sustainable energy has been on the increase. It is because it's a major part of SDG 7. And then we are looking at incremental energy goals. Now, I need to explain that a bit. What incremental energy goals means is every country, as you might understand already, the United Nations does not control the implementation of the SDGs. It leaves the mandate under different jurisdictions. If you are a nation, for example, like Kenya, the country or the government of the country has that mandate to implement the SDGs. If you are a kingdom, like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, then you also have the same mandate. So incremental energy goals means that you have to set your energy goals. For example, Kenya has set itself a goal to increase electrification by 50% in 2009, and then by 80% in 2018, and then by 2020, it should be at 100%. And I think we are very close to achieving that particular goal in terms of just rural electrification. I'm not talking about connection. I'm just talking about having a wire passing over your house. You having that wire dropping into your house is another question altogether. But then there has been a push towards this. If you look at another goal like tree planting, Kenya has a target of reaching 10% forest cover by the end of 2030 or by 2030. So then at 2030, then Kenya has agreed to set another goal, which might be maybe 15%, so that at the end of the day, we are increasing our sustainability over time and just trying to reduce the climate footprint. So that's what it means by incremental goals. And that's what SDG 7 is all about. SDG 7 is all about these 4 areas. The 4 areas can be broken down into very much varied dimensions, can be broken down into very small subsections. But when you look at the work that goes into SDG 7, it's mainly in these particular 4 areas. And that's where even the funding in research and other areas, partnerships have mainly focused. In the sub-Saharan African context, and when you see SSA, just know it's sub-Saharan Africa. In sub-Saharan African context, SDG 7 has been focusing mainly on access to sustainable energy in informal and rural settlements. You have to understand something about the energy poverty in Africa. The cities, most cities in Africa, are just as energy rich as the West or as anyone else in the world. Nairobi is just as energy rich as anyone else in the world. We might have questions in terms of management, but then in terms of access, in terms of capacity, Nairobi is just as energy rich as anyone else in the world. But a certain village in Congo, a certain village in Chad or Central African Republic, which as we saw is one of the whitest countries on the map, a certain village in that particular country does not have the same privileges. Or a certain part of their city, which is mostly the informal settlements. We are talking about what are traditionally called the slums. They do not have the same characteristic as that part of the world, as their cities. So Africa focuses on ensuring that there is better access for such people. And that's where research, that's where funding goes. Africa also focuses on developing pricing models that favor these 2 groups of people. Now, the pricing for energy in Africa, as I'll tell you, and this is why our research has focused so much in this area, the pricing favors 2 forms of energy. And when I mention the 2, you can already guess why. It favors oil and oil-related products and electricity. If I asked you trivially to guess why, I'm sure in 3 guesses or so, you'll have got all the reasons. Number 1 is because of the government interest. The government is so much interested in terms of income, especially from oil, and also in terms of control, especially from electricity. So then that means the pricing for these 2 is somewhat understood. It's not understood, but then at least the stakeholders at that particular level understand how the prices for these 2 are arrived at. The question about whether the person in the informal settlements understands is an open one, because 90% it's a no, unless they are working for government as well. And then also, there has been a lot of focus on pay-go models in terms of breaking bulk for energy, and also in terms of making the energy affordable, and in terms of making African energy use even more sustainable. Now, in different countries, there are different companies that do this. There are different pay-go companies in your country. I'll assure you that there is at least 1 or 2, if you put some work into finding out who they are. I actually found that every country in Africa has at least 1 pay-go company operating there. In Kenya, we have about 13 of them. And now I know the Kenyans will be asking me, which ones are these? You've never seen them. There are companies that are working in ethanol-based energy. There are companies that are working to break bulk in gas, LPG. There are companies that are working specifically to break bulk in LNG and different other forms of energy. So this has been a major focus for SSA. And lastly, which is a point of major focus for GENS, is gender mainstreaming in energy, especially increasing women inclusivity. Now, when I talk about increasing women inclusivity, people start thinking that you just have to increase the rate of women using energy. No. What we mean by gender mainstreaming is the exact meaning of the word mainstreaming. You have to make them mainstream. Mainstream means put them at a higher level. Make them decision makers. Ensure that you include them as entrepreneurs. Ensure that you include them at the policy level, because they are the main consumers of energy anywhere in the world. And also, they are the most affected by energy problems anywhere in the world. So you have to mainstream them, because then they will give you a first-hand experience of what goes on and what can be improved, and how you can make it even more affordable and more sustainable. And as they say, 100% of energy needs are made by, their decisions are made by the women, whether the men accept it publicly or not. So you have to understand that that happens. Even the light that we use, trust you me, even the number of times that you charge your phone in the house as a man, it's sometimes decided by the woman. You just don't know that she made that decision. Now, I don't want that the gender discussion to boil over, but trust me, it's a fact. When you've understood the SSA context, then you have to understand what is being done currently in terms of SDG 7. When you understand what is being done, then you'll understand how can you plug in. Then you'll understand how are these different goals plugging into each other. So what is being done? Number one, there has been a lot of research in terms of mainstreaming gender, especially for informal settlements in Africa and for rural settlements, and also for the marginalized settlements in Africa. GENS, as you see, I've indicated there, which is the organization that I'm very loyal to, is doing a lot of work in this. And there are different other organizations that are working. And I'll give you examples of Kenya. There are organizations that are working in the north, in Turkana, in terms of finding different forms of energy that can work for those people. There are organizations that are working in the northeast, especially in Wajir, to find out how they can have energy on the go, especially considering the security and living lifestyle of those people. They need some energy that they can carry around. So there are organizations that are working there. There are organizations that are working in the central part of Kenya to find out how they can increase their natural or their bioenergy potential. The organizations that are working in cities, in towns, in informal settlements, in Nairobi, for example, like GENS, to find out how informal settlements can have better access to energy at more affordable prices, at more reliable levels, and also to pay for them. Very important. Now, I'll just throw this at you because it's not part of what I intend to tell you, but I'll just throw this at you. 67% of energy consumed in informal settlements in Kenya is not paid for. Think about that. Now, the second issue that is happening is there has been a lot of stakeholder engagement in terms of energy transition to renewables. So there has been a lot of engagement from different people to government. There has been a lot of engagements from different people to companies and to producers, and also to citizens in terms of what do you want, how would you use it, and things like that. And also GENS is very much actively involved in doing this. And all the projects that I've mentioned to you have an element of stakeholder engagement. Some of them don't do it as well as you do, I'm sorry, but then there's at least an element of it in each of them. We have a mission, if I'd say, to fast track user-friendly, simplified, accessible, and relevant energy pricing models for sub-Saharan Africa. Now, if I asked you on this particular conference, do you know how the electricity you use in your house is priced? I would be so much excited if half of the people here said yes, but I would be so much surprised if 40% said yes, because then a lot of us, more than 60% of us, do not know. We just know that you pay 13 shillings per unit and you get units and you feed them in your meter and it works. That's all we know. But then do you know how it is priced? Do you know how it is arrived at? You don't need to know the mathematics because the mathematics can be complex. But then do you know the basics? Can you do it yourself? Can you know how much you'll pay for electricity next month and issues like that? That's a major problem, in informal settlements. And that's what researchers and also different stakeholders are trying to fast track. And lastly, there's increased investment in renewable energy production, consumption, and also at policy level. There's a lot of meetings and policy discussions and policy committees across the continent that have been formed to just try and make energy a household discussion. Just try to bring it more into the forefront so that different people can also understand it and also price it differently. South Africa has been a leader in this in terms of development of different models, development of different engagements for energy use at different levels. They still have their own challenges, but then they have been a leader in this. Kenya as well. Ethiopia, I have to mention, Ethiopia are doing a very good job at it. And also partly, although as I said, it's not part of the sub-Saharan Africa per se, but Egypt is doing a very good job at it. So these are 4 areas that have been of major focus in terms of trying to make sustainable energy or trying to further SDG 7. And I'll have done my organization Injustice, if I don't tell you a bit of also what we are doing, the work that we are doing with GENS, because we are working in each and every one of the 4 areas that I just mentioned for the SDGs. For example, we're doing a lot of research into gender mainstreaming in energy, in informal settlements, just from our name, mainstreaming gender in energy. It tells you that that is our core focus in terms of research. And I have to mention that our PIs, project investigators, who are our leaders, have a very high passion in terms of trying to ensure that the aspect of gender is mainstreamed in energy and understood, which is very much important. Understood. My partner in crime, the lady I work with most in Nairobi, she's called Peris Njoroge. She's focused generally on gender and policy. So then you look at policy, you look at gender, and then you put energy there and find how are these 3 correlating. And I'll show you a figure at the very end that shows you just a bit of how they are correlating. We're also doing an extensive focus in multiplayer energy pricing models. And that's where I am best. That's where I rest. And that's where what I sleep and drink. I sleep and drink mathematics, models, and formulas, just so that I can look at how can we price different forms of energy so that they can be understood, accessed, and also used by the informal settlements and the common wananchi in each and every country. We are doing a lot of research and also undertaking a lot of stakeholder engagement so that we can focus on the 2 objectives that I've just shown above. And this is something that we have actively started engaging in. In the next few months, we will be engaging stakeholders both in Kenya and South Africa, stakeholders at different levels so that we can also understand their energy needs and their energy behaviors and different aspects of that. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we are engaging communities, for example, in Mathare, in Kenya. We are engaging policymakers and industry leaders, for example, government. For example, if you are in Kenya, KPLC, EPRA, and such organizations. If you are in other countries, of course, you have your energy regulator, you have your energy pricing agency, you have your energy distribution agency, and also production agencies and issues like that. And also we are engaging academia and researchers as well to just try and make sure that you understand the pain and the challenges that people from different levels face. There's a common saying in the echelons of government that the suits make the policy for the shots, and the suits do not understand anything about the shots. What that means is people who are in these informal settlements are assumed to work in shots because they work mostly in informal kinds of labor. And then the people who are in suits sit in offices and they throw their jackets on their chairs and also go away. Sorry if you work in that sector, I don't mean that you do that. Just assuming, imagining that there's someone somewhere who does that, not you though. But then the feeling is that when you make policy for the people at that level, then you don't understand their feelings. So this kind of stakeholder engagement then just helps you to understand these people more. And what have we learned while we are working in that? Very critical, because this will help you to just understand the gaps, and also where getting out of this conference, you can also plug in as a stakeholder, and also in terms of research, and also in terms of investment and innovation, if you are doing that. Number 1, women will be important if we are going to achieve any progress in SDG 7. And as I said, you might not know it, but then the lady in your house makes a lot of the decision in terms of the energy that you use. So you have to accept that reality and also involve them more. Number 2, if we have to make proper transition, then we are supposed to change our pricing in terms of the stakeholders that we involve, and involve all the stakeholders from the bottom up. The problem that we have with pricing and also policy pricing in Africa is the people are involved, but then we just involve them at a level where we are just collecting their feedback about the already formed opinions. And we are not really involving them when it comes to how do you do this. We are just asking them, we are going to price electricity at 30 shillings per unit. What do you think? That is not a good way to involve them, because they tell you it's bad, it's good, we don't like it, we like it. But does that really help them understand it? No. Does that help them transition? No. What it does, it makes them feel that whatever you are giving them is more expensive. Yet research has shown that sustainable energy like electricity is cheaper in the long run compared to things like biomass, charcoal, and such sources of energy. Even gas, electricity is actually cheaper than LPG from research. So you have to encourage people to understand how it's priced so that they can understand why they should use which one. Number three, in what we have learned is if we are going to make this house or commonplace, then we are going to have to infuse a lot of energy. As I told you, in energy price modeling, I look at a lot of formulas in models like the ARIMA, the GASH models, including the neural networks and such other prediction functionalities, price fluctuations. All those are formulas. All those are just numerical things. And as you can imagine, not very many people are comfortable with numbers. So you have to infuse technology so that you can, find a way of putting these numbers together in something and then now feeding it to the people in terms of a model that they can just put in numbers and, get back projections or predicted price. For example, I'm just giving you an example of the things that people look at when it comes to energy pricing here. And you look at mostly across Africa, there are the ARIMA models, the GASH model, the neural network incorporation, adjustment to socioeconomic and political factors, and much more. I'm talking about price fluctuations, the gamma fluctuations and issues like that. You do not need to understand any of those. But then you just need to understand that it's complex. If you are going to incorporate 2 or 3 of these, all which are different mathematical functions, then you are going to have to simplify it for someone to understand. For the lady, especially because you've said that the women are the most important or the most involved stakeholders, for the lady in the village to understand, then you have to simplify this into a form that is available to them. And that's where technology comes in terms of trying to make this much a reality. This picture is always a very interesting picture for me. This is a picture of Mathare in Kenya. And all these, as you can see, are not cloth lines. These are electric lines. There's live electricity passing in each and every line that you can see here, as much as they look like they are greeting each other. And you can imagine the danger that is there. The reason why these wires are this many, and some of them clearly look like they are clothing lines, is because a lot of them are what I will call informal. They are not recognized, they are not on the grid, but people are using electricity from them. As they call them there, it's called mulikamwizi. And so you will understand that we have to make this simpler. If we have to make this simpler, then we have to create some order. If we have to convince these people to have some order, then we have to convince them that we have involved them in terms of making the decision for the pricing, in terms of involving the people that make the decisions, who are the women, in terms of research, which involves them, in terms of financing that is based on them, in terms of innovations that are customized to them. And then they'll understand that we have these solutions that we can use. Therefore, we do not need to, to have our own local connections. We can rely on the connections from these providers because then we have been involved. Throughout our research, one of the things that we found to be very critical, and it will be very critical for those of you who are in industry, is that however good a project is, as long as its genesis did not involve the people are bound to reject it. You have to take that home, because then until industry understands that particular part, we are going to develop innovations that will just remain that. They will remain innovations, good innovations, but they will never work. I'll give you an example. In Mathare, there has been attempts to install solar energy, but then the community has rejected some of them because the community does not understand how this helps them. There has been an effort to install, digital metering for the electricity so that they can have prepaid electricity. Is it prepaid or postpaid? Yes, prepaid electricity. And the challenge that it faced is that the people reject it because then they were not consulted. It is good, but they just do not understand why they should leave their comfort and come to what you're offering them. So for those of you in industry, you have to understand that you have to involve these people, because then that's the best way you bring them on board. Very much quickly, I want to bring us into SDG 9. Now, as you will imagine, SDG 9, I am diving into an unknown here because I am in academia, which we focus a lot on SDG 7. But then SDG 9 is also part of what we do a lot. Number one, SDG 9 is about farthest reaching, is one of the farthest reaching, and it involves industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Anywhere in the world, those three will form 40–50% of the economy. Industry is everyone in industry. Innovation is anything being innovated, and infrastructure is anything infrastructure, roads, the rural electrification, airports, everything. So you can imagine that's over 50% of an economy anywhere in the world. And then I'll put there in brackets and research. Because what most of the people in industry ignore is what researchers have found to work. Like I've just told you about how you can do sustainable energy in a place like Mathare. For it to be accepted, they have to be included. But the people in industry tend to ignore that and think because this solution is very good, because we know this solution is very good, and they are right about it, that solution might be very good. But then there's an assumption that it will be accepted. No, it will not. Ask researchers and they'll tell you that, you know what, stakeholder engagement at that level is very much important. And then people assume, for example, and this has been an assumption that has been made a lot across different parts of Africa, that because when you do research, especially because of the income gaps that we still have across the continent, gender income gaps, you'll find that the men are the ones paying for most of the electricity. Now, what industry assumes is that if we know what the men who are paying think, then we can develop a solution that is forecast to them, then they will buy it. What you do not understand is that the guy pays, really, but he does not decide what he pays for. When you understand such intricacies, for example, that the person who will come to collect the energy, in many cases, is a child. In many African communities, the adults do not just go collecting the sources of energy themselves, they send their children. Now, if you have a gas cylinder that weighs 40 kilograms, how is a child supposed to carry that exactly? You have to think about a few issues before you develop solutions for these people, especially in rural areas, because that's what happens there. And you can only understand that through research. Number two, this is mainly about scoping different stakeholders and including them in terms of what happens in industry and innovation. And this includes, and I understand that I just have 7 minutes. This includes NGOs, academia, and also the people. So you have to understand how to incorporate them in different aspects of what you're doing. Number three, understanding SDG 9 means that you have to understand the role of each stakeholder. Now that statement could be vague and it could be misunderstood at different levels. And I chose to leave it at that because, as I told you, this is the widest SDG in terms of coverage. There are others that are wider, but then this is also very, very wide. And the stakeholders are quite many. So if I start telling you about the role of each stakeholder, we are likely to spend the entirety of the conference on this particular topic. There is the government, of course, which is the biggest stakeholder. There are the people who are also very big stakeholders. And then there's industry and innovators at another level. You have to understand them in the way in which they interrelate. And let me just show you this, in the way in which they interrelate in this particular form, but then I'll tell you about this in just a minute. So you have to understand the role of each and every one of those stakeholders. You have to understand what role does the people, the consumers, play. And those are the stakeholders that are ignored. We have found that a lot of you in industry and also in government involve each other because, you know, there's something that we call the neighborhood effect. You feel like you are neighbors and, you know, in terms of what you do, in terms of income, but then you don't think about the person behind that particular consumption. You have to include them if you are going to make any decisions. Industry and innovations include different aspects. And I decided to place this in terms of questions that you could ask yourself getting out of this conference, because then that will help you to factor in or to figure out different stakeholders and how to involve them, how they are involved. And the last question, as you'll see, is colored in red, is how you can be involved. So the first question that you should ask yourself is what is my government as a stakeholder doing to contribute to SDG 9? Go to different energy government websites. For example, energy providers, KPLC in Kenya, EPRA, KenGen, and also just the Ministry of Energy, and find out what are they doing, who are they working with, and why are they working with these people. In that, you will find different gaps in terms of what is being done and how you can play a role. Number two, find out which companies and organizations are working to accelerate innovations in infrastructure in your country and in your area of jurisdiction as well. As I told you, there are about 17 paygo power companies in Kenya. Most of them are based in Nairobi. Each country in Africa has at least one. Find who is doing what and how can you be involved. When you find out who is doing what, then you can find out what are they doing, what's the basis of what they are doing, and also how can you be able to plug in. Number 3, find out who is working in research and development in energy in your country. Now, this will mean that most of you in industry have to go into areas that you are not comfortable going into. That means engaging academia. That means engaging professors. That means engaging researchers and research companies. And most of you do not really do that, which leaves you open to implementing things without considering what's on the ground. Find out who are the funders and why are they funding these types of solutions, because then when you understand why they funding it, then you can look at the research that they have done and the long-term gap that they see in that particular area. Find out who are the target communities and why. If research in geothermal is targeting communities, rural communities in the Rift Valley, why? If research in solar mini-grids, for example, in Kenya, are also mostly targeting communities in the upper, the Northern Rift, the North Rift part of Kenya, why? So you have to find out those target communities and also find out why. And lastly, find out what are they working towards. So if they are working with communities in rural Northern Kenya, why and what do they aim to achieve? Do they aim to make them, the women more of decision makers? Do they aim to bring in more investments? Do they aim to connect more people? Do they aim to break more bulk? Do they aim to make it cheaper? Or do they aim to make these people understand their pricing models even better? Why? So you have to look at what are they aiming at. And the last one is, across each of these, how can I be involved? I can be your company. I can be you as an individual. When you look at these 4 areas, or these 3 areas plus how you can be involved, then you will find out what's going on in this humongous SDG 9 section, and also how you can be involved in this SDG 9 section. Now, when it comes to bidirectional linkages between SDG 7 and SDG 9, I just came up with 2 images, which are pretty much the same image, but then they are presented in different forms. And as you can see clearly, in the middle here, I don't know whether I can annotate this so that, okay, no, I can't annotate this. If I could have been able to annotate, oh, yeah, I can, okay, perfect. As you can see, in the middle here, okay, you have SDG 7. It lies in the middle there, okay? Let me make the color different so that you can see it better. Perfect. Yeah, so in the middle there, you have SDG 7. And then standing alone in the economic part is SDG 9. SDG 7 has a social element to it, has an environmental element to it, and has an economic element to it. But standing alone in the economic quadrant, it seems to be a very lonely SDG, is SDG 9. And you can see the space that it has, a lot of space to work in itself. I'm not saying that it's the only one that targets the economy. Of course, we have SDG 10, we have 12, we have 8, 7, 2, blah, blah, blah. They all target the economy in one way or the other, but SDG 9 does not target anything else. It only targets the economy. This one does not target anything else. It only targets the economy. So you have to understand that it interlinks with the others, but it's kind of a standalone there. But then it has some sort of linkage to SDG 7 over here, because then they are in the same quadrant when it comes to economic consumption. So when you look at it in that form, SDG 7 is what I call the very strong linkage. It is a strong bond because then it brings together the 3 elements of an economy: the social element, the people, the environmental element from sustainability, and the economic element from development. SDG 9 is mainly about income and developing. So how does it link to SDG 7? Therefore, when you are developing, you have to include different stakeholders, and have insinuated this throughout my discussion. You have to include these stakeholders at all levels, and you have to include them as key stakeholders. There is nothing like a minor stakeholder when it comes to implementing solutions that are supposed to have a massive intake, that are supposed to change the way people think and the way people live. There's nothing like a minor stakeholder. Each stakeholder is a major stakeholder. And then when you are linking these two, what comes in terms of the social aspect, you can see SDG 7 is also in the social part, so it also links to SDG 9 from the social aspect, are the issues that I've just told you about: gender issues, employment issues, income issues, and issues like that. You have to implement solutions that can be afforded by the people. You have to implement pricing models that can be understood by the people. GENS is looking at furthering research that can help you understand these different elements. And if you can also plug into organizations like GENS and understand what have they found out, what can you contribute in as an organization when you're doing your innovations and different things, you know, just as a by the way, you can also throw in some financing so that you can also do more work. But then, you know, you need to figure out how can you partner with organizations like that. And this last image is also just a representation of the same image that you're having here, but in a different form. This time around in a top-down approach so that you can understand it better. The social dimension, social dimension, when you have drunk a lot of tea, social, okay. The social dimension is at the center, as you can see. It incorporates the most number of SDGs aged. The economic dimension exclusively incorporates 4, and then environmental dimension incorporates 4 as well. And then there's one SDG that goes all over the place, is SDG 17, which is about partnerships. So that is a very brief summary of a topic that can take us a whole 3 days to discuss. Interlinks between SDG 7 and SDG 9. This is not a topic that can be concluded in 30 minutes, as I have tried to do. If we want to go in depth into each of those elements, as your questions might dictate, then we might need a lot longer than the time that we've had. So thank you very much. I welcome any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Douglas, for that wonderful, wonderful session. The thing that I've really gotten from you is that women run the energy world, even if we do not want to admit, it is true. Whether it's in your home or it's in the informal sector or everywhere else, we run the world in the background. And that's why we need to include more women in decision making when it comes to energy. So thank you so much. We've learned a lot about gender mainstreaming in energy pricing models, and both the SDGs 7 and 9. And we ask that you please post your questions on the chat and comments as we receive them, and post them to Douglas for about 5 minutes. I can see a question here from Carol Gazuru. Carol, do you want to unmute yourself and ask? It looks very interesting.
Yes, sure. I was very interested in that steamer Mwitu or electricity Mwitu concept that Douglas so visually projected. And I know this is a very Kenyan way of saying it. I was wondering, in the other informal settlements around Africa, what do they refer to that as? Because it's a syndrome, it's a whole ecosystem up there on its own, and it needs to be given the recognition it deserves. Yeah.
Okay. For other people who are not Swahili speaking, Mwitu means, what does Mwitu mean? I don't know, in the bushes, or mainly it's something that has been taken without permission. And so that's what you're wondering, how does the rest of Africa call it? You can put that on the comments here. I can also see a comment from the Cynthia Bani. Cynthia, maybe you can unmute yourself and just give your comment as we wait for more questions.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking SDG 9 can also be targeting environment, not only economic. As we have been focusing on global warming, industries have been told to find a way to incorporate renewable energy into their industries. So I feel, other than saying SDG 9 is only in economic, it can also be in environment.
Right. Thank you for that comment. I think we are seeing a lot of more integration in terms of SDGs coming together. And maybe Douglas can also touch on that and comment on that as well.
Great,
Okay.
great. I don't know what happened. My screen has stopped sharing on my laptop device. I just wanted to bring back that image.
Okay. Yeah, we'll allow you in a moment.
Ah, perfect. It's back. Let me see. So let me just start by responding to the very last one in terms of SDG 9 and how it incorporates different other sectors. Now, before I get into trouble, I did not say that it can only incorporate environment and social. As you can see right here, SDG 9 has a way of getting into each of the other dimensions, each of the other 3 dimensions. So it incorporates the environment in also different aspects, sustainability in terms of carbon pricing, in terms of different targets that arise from the Paris Agreement. Every country has their own nationally determined contributions. And so the NDCs and the industry really is where the countries try to implement the NDCs more, because then if you are having old vehicles on the road, they are going to emit more. So as much as it's part of infrastructure, the government has to try and make sure that they are climate sustainable. If you're having more industries using coal, for example, then is it sustainable? The government might want to look into that. If you have more energies, more companies using solar, then that's more sustainable. So there's these goals are fluid, so to say. They interject with each other in very different ways, and you have to look at it from the different connections that you intend to create. I intended to create the connection between SDG 7 and SDG 9, and that's why I didn't mention the environmental aspect a lot. But yes, there's a lot of interlink between all the 3 different dimensions of energy. How is Timamwitu referred to across Africa? I would invite the linguistic researchers to try and find that out for us. I would really appreciate if we had a chart that just shows this is called Timamwitu in Kenya, this is what it's called in Uganda. I'm sure in South Africa it would have 42 names because South Africans have a lot of languages. This is what it's called in Tanzania. I would be very much interested in looking at that. I honestly do not know how it's referred to in the other countries. But in short, it is informal connections. Connections, which I said, are not paid for. About 60-something% of it in informal settlements in Kenya are not paid for. So those are the connections we are talking about. And the connections that the government cannot shut down. If they shut down one line, they hook it over to another line. So that's what we're talking about. I don't know what they are called in other countries. I don't know whether I missed any questions.
No, I can see a question here from Nora.
Okay.
And she's saying women truly interact with energy the most, but how can we innovatively shift the gender power structure for effective mainstreaming?
Excellent. My partner in crime, I'll mention her again, is called Paris. She's dealing exclusively in terms of with mainstreaming gender in policy, at the policy level mainly, in energy. And throughout her work, she ends up dealing with gender mainstreaming in everything. And we have a team in South Africa, by the way, that also does the same. And my colleague from the UK, she's called Aine. She's also working a lot in terms of stakeholder engagement. And I think Aine is somewhere on this call. If we are supposed to include women better, and my boss and PI in Kenya, Dr. Amola Mbole, always says this, if we are supposed to include women better, then we have to move away from looking at them as women. We have to move to a point of looking at them as equal stakeholders. That means that you have to look at them as people who can take part at every level. As I said, they run the show. So when you are making the decisions in terms of what policy is best for energy, do you have a woman who can give you perspective at the policy level? When you are making decisions in terms of what innovations do we need that can further sustainable energy, do you have a woman who can give you the woman's perspective? When you are making decisions in terms of what are the best means to distribute, do you have a woman who can give you that perspective? I'm not saying that you don't need the men at that level, but you have to understand that you cannot make a decision for people living in mud houses if you have never lived in a mud house. You will not understand how many doors are necessary for a mud house. Do we even understand the role of an escalator if you have never lived in a story building? No, you can't. So you have to involve somebody who has used an escalator before. So you have to involve people who are the main consumers, main decision makers, main people affected by energy. When you are eradicating smoke, for example, that means moving away from wood, you ask a lady in the village what challenges she has gone through while cooking, because let's face it, while you might want to paint a different picture, most of the cooking in the rural area, if not all, is done by women. When you ask that woman what challenges she has gone through using wood, she will explain to you challenges like she's recording a movie. As a man, I'll just say, I saw that smoke coming to the sitting room 3 days ago. I will not understand the other processes of how much tears came out of her eyes. But the lady will understand how much coughing she did, what she felt in her stomach, how much trouble, other breathing problems she's been having because of this. She will give you all that. And then you'll understand, by the way, we need to move away from this. So that is how you do it. You need to involve them not as women. You need to erase the women part and now start considering them as key stakeholders at every level. That's the only way that you can be able to include them well. Until and unless we do that, then most of the energy solutions that we are trying to develop will be vague, sorry to say.